Freeberg, you are always candid about your own journey. You've had huge wins, climate.com for $1 billion, raising funds, but sometimes things don't work out. What's your take on some of these hard lessons of great ideas, spun up during this really hard market?
I mean, I think just to echo the point you guys are making, in the last 15 years, we've been in a, call it, structurally inflated environment because of the zero interest rate policy since the '08 financial crisis. And everything's been up and to the right, or so much. It's been so easy to kind of inflate things, fill up hot air balloons and go up and to the right. And unfortunately, most folks who are working in the investor community that are sitting on boards weren't around for the dot-com crash the last time this happened. And I think, just to kind of echo your point, why it's so challenging, I think, right now to figure out a way out. There's a lot of failure going on in Silicon Valley right now. Sachs, you talk a little bit about having paths for exit and options for SaaS companies, but there are many sectors in startup land that don't have those sorts of options. In biotech, in synbio, in fintech, in direct-to-consumer e-commerce, there's a lot of markets and a lot of types of businesses that feel like there isn't a great way out. And it's having a deep psychological toll on entrepreneurs, on founders, on CEOs, and everyone is experiencing some degree of failure in this environment. There are very few folks who aren't feeling this acute pressure and this acute pain. I heard some pretty horrific stories this week from a friend of mine and someone who ended up in the hospital because of the pressure he was under. And it's really trying. And, even within our friend group, I mean, not our direct friend group, but within our broader community of investor friends, there are very few people who aren't feeling this extraordinary pressure that they've got a book that is declining in value and they don't know how to get out of the hole. And, that pressure generates deep questions about one's ability and generates deep existential thought for entrepreneurs and investors about what the hell am I good at? And no one's really talking about this out loud, but it is happening across the valley. We all have these thoughts. We all have these dialogues as the failure begins to set in the slow motion train wreck of a market that we've all been talking about for weeks and months.
How do you deal with it?
Look, I mean, I just think that number one, it's worth acknowledging and it's worth having the conversation that no one is alone going through this pain. It is not a one-off that these companies are failing. It is that we are all dealing with failure right now. And we are all trying to figure out what is the best path forward. And it is a kind of thing that you just have to work your way through and you have to persist through this pain. But this existential question of, am I good enough? Do I have the skill set I thought I had? Am I just an idiot? Did I blow it up? Emperor has no clothes. All the kind of inner fear and turmoil that everyone's dealing with, you're not alone going through it. A lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of investors are in the exact same place. Now, with respect to going forward, I think having integrity with respect to how you handle these situations and having thoughtfulness about, your reputation, because this is not a one and done environment here in Silicon Valley. Failure is part of the process, and how you deal with people, deal with investors, deal with entrepreneurs, deal with each other, deal with your employees during these difficult times says a lot about your character and your ability, that when you do this the next time, it will set you up for success. And, as any great athlete will tell you, you build muscle during the times that you're failing, and then you're ready to go and execute the next time around. So, let's save it for the next quarter, but let's play well as best we can right now through this quarter.
Chamath, clearly you want to jump in here. What are your thoughts on separating your identity from your startup, from your work, and having a more balanced view of yourself so that when things go wrong, maybe you're not as devastated, you don't wind up in a hospital bed?
When things go wrong, they go wrong in bunches. Just like when things go right, they tend to go right in bunches. I called Freeberg last week and I was telling him a story about 2 or 3 of my businesses just pounding, eating dirt. And what I said to him was, and then we have a mutual investment that's doing pretty well. And I needed to use the one that was doing well to make myself feel better about the 3 that were eating dirt. And I said to him something to the effect of, it's just like nothing is working. I feel like literally nothing is working.
It's a tough place to be.
The only thing that you can do in those moments is just realize it would be so much worse to just be on the sidelines.
Oh, I like it.
And I think that's all you can do. Then you go and hang out with your friends, go hang out with your family, kiss your wife, have as good of a time as possible outside the context of work, and then you just start the grind again. But
yeah,
we are in a moment where in most companies, there is something pretty wrong. It's either your burn,
product
your
market fit,
traction,
customers, team,
cap structure,
spend, riff, cap table. Yeah.
And by the way, that's always the problem, but it tends to be balanced by a few things in your portfolio that are always going well, so that as an investor, you can maintain some equanimity through the whole process. But Friedberg is right. When there aren't enough of these positives and there's just a parade of terribles, you're just like, wow, this whole portfolio, is it all about to fail? And then I get a massive wave of imposter syndrome of like, what am I doing here? And then I have to recognize, holy shit, this is my 24th year. Take a deep breath. And it's great that it's that exhilarating where I think it's back to 2000 and I just emigrated here. That's
the conversation Chamath and I had.
It's beautiful.
We were talking about like a string of difficult things we were all dealing with. You know, a couple of weeks ago, we announced that we returned all the money to all our customers at Canna, which was this molecular beverage printer company I've been working on for a few years. I plowed north of $30 million of our capital into building this business. We had 2 term sheets last year, both of which vaporized as the markets degraded. It was really a brutal experience for me. And these were at very high valuations. And we needed funding to get the production line stood up to manufacture that device. So we were that close.
Oh, man.
And as the market went south, pre-revenue hardware companies became less fundable. And despite our reputation and a great working product and a manufacturing ready prototype, we couldn't get it done. It was a really kind of brutal experience to go through the no's. Even after you've had a lot of success in your life, believe it or not, you still get a lot of friggin' no's. And you get a lot of I don't believe yous. And then to just have to get to a point with this one was really difficult. And there's, been other kind of frustrating experiences of late. And then, you kind of have a call one day with another investment and you're like, oh my God, this thing could be a home run. Yeah. And that just comes out of nowhere. And, as long as we kind of stay in it as an investor and you keep, as a builder and you kind of keep building, you don't know when that good knock on the door is going to come.
Yep. You got to stay in the game.
If you're building a business and one day you just nail a sale that you just weren't expecting, or a partnership or an M&A inbound or something that happens that you weren't expecting, it pays for all the pain and all the loss and all the turmoil and all the downside. I always used to tell people for every, 4 days I'd be failing, I'd have 1 day of success, but that 1 day of success will get me slightly ahead of where I was at the start of the week. But 80% of it was failing. I mean, right now it's like 19 days of failure and 1 day of success. But that 1 day of success, the goal is you used to have a couple of those punctuated moments that are big enough that make up for all this stuff. If you just keep grinding. And if you just keep grinding as an entrepreneur, you keep grinding as an investor and stay in the game.
Living with the power law. You're describing living with the power law. Yeah.
There's a very relatable poker analogy in this. There's a guy that makes poker content. His name is Jonathan Little.
He's great. He'll be at the Angel Summit. Yeah.
He's wonderful. I've been thinking about hopping into one tournament at the WSOP this year. It's one of the big buying tournaments. So I'm like, let me just take a little tournament refresher. And I was just looking for any content and I found his, and he had this beautiful slide, which he said, if you are a mid-level poker player, you should expect to final table every 1 in 100 tournaments, roughly. And I thought about that for a second and I was like, that's a 1% success rate. Now, if that is your 99th tournament, you have to be pretty resilient to go through 98 losses where you don't cash, you don't make the money, and you're just putting money out, you're deep in a J curve and you're like, is this ever going to work out for me? And so it's a really, really good reminder that it is the grind.
Yep.
And I thought that was really interesting.
Sachs, you had